Oh yeah, the way you make granola is buy granola and put it in a bowl. Hi, I'm Phil. Welcome to Pretty Good Cooking.
Pretty good.
Tonight on the show, I'm sharing a very special recipe, which is my grandpa's secret granola recipe. There's a picture of the granola. My grandpa passed away a few years ago, and this recipe is actually from a specific training session that I asked him to show me how to make it. This granola recipe is a part of my normal holiday experience growing up. We would visit my grandparents, and my grandpa would make these enormous batches of granola that we would eat over the course of visiting. And even though he's passed away, we still make it some years and share it. So I thought it would be nice to share with you. He told me that he learned something like this from going to like Jewish summer camp, but he's not Jewish, so I don't know what he was doing there other than hanging out and eating granola. Here's a picture of my grandpa. Doesn't he look nice? His name was Norman. Stormin' Norman. My grandma used to, when she was in pain or like needed something, she would go, Norm! Anyways, this recipe I'm sharing with our patrons for this quarter. This is one of the goodies. So look for that granola in the mail. Hopefully, you know, it makes it. And by the way, I meant to say that when I first talked about the backstory. If you have relatives who make things that you like and you love that relative, like spend time with them learning how to make it. Like I am so happy that I did this. And I did this like way before I knew anything about cooking. And it's kind of cringe, like some of the stuff that I wrote in the recipe, such as use your instincts, young Padawan. I'm not really proud of that one. But you can see here, I even, well, it's all broken up. I included like a diagram of how my grandpa used to mix it in the bowl. So you should do that. Okay, for this recipe, we're gonna start with some dry ingredients. And we're gonna do this by weight. It starts with some quick cooking oats. So this is Quaker Oats I sprung for the name brand. And we're gonna put in 18 ounces of this into a bowl. But actually, to do this OG style, we're actually gonna put it directly into a cake pan. Or if you got a casserole, that's fine too. And I'm doing it by weight. He would do it by eye. So you don't really need to have a bowl. What is my brain trying to say? You don't really need to have two separate things to do this, but it's also fine to do it that way. It doesn't really matter. You're just mixing dry ingredients. You can see I've done a little bit over 18 ounces because it's not precise. Next up, we are gonna add Wheat Germ. And I think Kretschmer is probably the only f***ing company that makes this, because this is the jar he used to use, and I've never seen any other brand of Wheat Germ. And what is Wheat Germ? I don't know. It's some byproduct of wheat, I believe. You are gonna add 5 to 6 ounces of Wheat Germ, and I'll tell you now, if you add 5 ounces, then you'll get a nice round number for the dry ingredients. Because 18 plus 5 is 23, and then we're gonna add 7 ounces of coconut. You get 30 ounces. This is a 14-ounce bag of coconut, and I used half of it in the previous batch. There are different kinds of coconut. There's sweetened, there's unsweetened. I would use sweetened for this, and that's specifically because you want a little bit of sweetness in a granola. But we'll talk about that as we go through the ingredients. Like, you can basically like change the healthiness of this based on the ingredients you put in. But sweetened coconut is just fine. That is the normal kind of baking coconut that you'll find hanging around in the baking aisle. All right, using your hands, mix these on up. You can do this in a cake pan, casserole, or in the bowl. Doesn't really matter. Mix it on up. All right, now we need the wet ingredients, which are 3/4 of a cup of vegetable oil. A neutral oil of your choosing would be the thing to do here. And then we're gonna add a 1/2 cup of honey. My notes in this recipe call for the honey being in a container that is capable of being poured. This looks like it will be capable of that, so we need 1/2 of 1 cup of honey. All right. We will also add 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. That's for flavor. And according to what I wrote down, just under 1/4 cup of water. I literally remember my grandpa doing this. He was like, Okay. So the weird thing in my notes, it says don't over mix this wet stuff, but I kind of feel like you probably should mix it mostly, because otherwise, you know, look, you got like some oil going on, some honey going on there. It's kind of weird if you don't. I'm gonna give it a at least pretty significant mix until it becomes, you know, some kind of flavor syrup is really what we're going for. I don't want to risk losing any of that liquid. What's gonna happen is you're gonna have portions of this granola that are pretty wet and therefore will kind of caramelize, and then you'll have other portions which are pretty dry. And so by doing that, you have a depth of texture. And I'm not memeing, I mean you are creating something that has layers of texture, which I think is pretty important in granola. And then using this spoon I used for the other batch, well, that's why it's got schmutz on it. But this is a granola spoon, so do not fear, it's not just a dirty spoon. Go ahead and mix it in lightly. My grandpa would use this like really big oversized metal spoon that he had. I don't know if he used that for anything else, but I don't have a spoon that big. Oh shit! And I preheat the oven to 350. Meant to do that. That's the first thing you should do. So what you can see, even with me like incorporating this, you can see there are significant parts of this that are pretty dry. See, that's dry, and then there's some wet granola here. That's fine. That's fine. And that is the intended texture of this particular style of granola. Okay, so this will go into the oven for 45 minutes to an hour. And we have to be mindful of it. Keep that granola spoon handy. We're gonna mix it up a few times as we bake it. I recommend doing that about every 15 minutes. So the oven is not hot by any means, but you know, 45 minutes to an hour is a pretty big window. So we'll go ahead and stick it in. We're gonna put it on the bottom rack. I'm gonna see if that improves the top browning or not. Check that in 15 minutes. All right, so while we are waiting, we can actually prep some of the other stuff. While you're waiting for that to bake, you can get a lot of the other ingredients prepared. So in the biggest container you have, and my grandpa used to literally use one of these big things that's got a Tupperware lid. This is the size of the batch you're gonna make. We'll pretty much fill this thing up. We're gonna first, well, I mean, you could do this in any order, but some of the other ingredients include chopped dates. And chopped dates, for whatever reason, almost always come in a 10-ounce container, and that is the amount that you put in. Chopped dates, we've probably never used on the show for anything. Here's what they look like. I like them a lot. They're almost, they're similar to like raisins or craisins, but less sweet, I guess. But in your big container, put in the whole thing. Next up, we're gonna add some nuts. And actually, it's a lot of nuts. So here I have roasted sunflower seeds, and they're not salted. And for all these nuts, you probably wanna go with not salted, because in the context of a granola, you want to be able to control that salt level. I also suspect in hindsight that like some of the nuts my grandpa used to use were probably salted, because I remember there being more salt in the finished product. But if you just use nothing salted, you could just add salt at the end. Or you could literally salt your granola, like when you eat it. We need to use 15 ounces of sunflower seeds, which is a lot. That's 7.5, so throw in another bag. Next up, we're going to add cashews. I think my grandpa just really liked cashews because we used mixed nuts and cashews, and mixed nuts are primarily cashews and almonds. About 8.5. I got a little extra here, but that's fine. Those are, once again, not salted. And then here's our Deluxe mixed nuts, unsalted. We're gonna add 11.5 ounces of that. And if you're wondering why these weird numbers, it's primarily because that's whatever the container that my grandpa would buy from Publix. Those, you know, the standard container. In hindsight, you can see that there are some pistachios in here, but it never had pistachios. But also there's so few of them that it doesn't matter. One other thing, there is not Brazil nuts in this particular mix, and his typically had Brazil nuts. So that's an oversight on my behalf. And go ahead and give that a mix. And now is as good a time as any to talk about the clusters. So, a lot of granola has clusters, right? Yes. The way that my grandpa would put clusters in his granola is by mixing in a box of store-bought granola. And it was Heartland brand. And here is a scan from sometime in their, like 2009 maybe. It's just a god-awful scan of the front of a box of granola. And I learned in doing a little cleanup research for this recipe that this is discontinued. So nobody ever is gonna actually taste Grandpa's granola recipe again. But Heartland was a pretty basic granola. So what I did is I bought a couple other kinds of granola that had clusters, and we're just gonna put them in. So I have toasted coconut granola. More coconut's not gonna hurt us by any means. And I'm already anticipating that someone's gonna give me shit about like, oh yeah, the way you make granola is buy granola and put it in a bowl. But this is how my grandpa did it. I mean, I also got vanilla almond clusters with probiotics. These look like really big clusters. Look at those big chunks. Looks good. In the grand scheme of things, you won't really notice these a whole lot, but it is nice to have that big hunk. So you can see we've filled the bowl about halfway up with nuts, dates, and clusters, and then we'll finish it by mixing in the other granola that we made. It's pretty simple, but it is very, very delicious. But in general, we just gotta wait for the other granola to cook. There's nothing else to do right now. So we're gonna go do other things. See you back here soon. All right, it's been 15 minutes. The oven wasn't really hot for that period of time, but that's okay. You can see on the top a little bit of browning action. Smells great, it smells good. But what you'll see in particular with this casserole that I'm using, the top browns, but the bottom does as well. So as indicated from the master, you need to stir the granola towards the middle, because if you don't, it can fall out of the pan and you'll have tragic losses. As I recall, my grandpa would literally open the oven and just root around in there with a spoon. So, you know, it would be much worse in that situation, you know, if you knock the granola out the goddamn pan. I'll also take this this moment to share another memory of my grandparents, which is my grandma really liked Cooler Ranch Doritos dipped in mayonnaise. So I come by it naturally is what I'm trying to say. But she would store the Doritos in the oven because they didn't use the oven that much. So like sometimes we could go to you know, Grandpa and Grandma's condo and he was just like open the oven and be like, ooh, Doritos. I think one time that oven got preheated with Doritos in there. So there you go. And we'll keep that process going probably for about an hour. Probably about an hour. We'll show you what it looks like when it's done, which is not yet, so we can't show you yet. All right, here is our fluffy granola mix. You can see it's got nice roasty toasty. Most of the things in here are roasted up. Nothing's burnt, nothing's sticking, but you want a fluffy texture. Look how fluffy that is. So this is the major fluffy base, and then all those crunchy things that we mix together, that'll be the other component. So we are gonna let this cool down a bit before we do the final mix. So we'll just be back in a few minutes when it cools down, and then we'll mix it up. But really you just want it to look pretty golden brown. That's the main goal here. It's looking good. All right, it's cooled down enough that we can put it in that big bucket. And the reason you gotta let it cool is you're supposed to mix it with your hands, like so. Sifting it and then rotating it on an angle. It's still a little warm, my hands! But honestly, you don't gotta do it that way. You could just use a spoon or an instrument of your choosing. But this is it. This is that Grandpa granola in its final form. And I genuinely think that batch number 2 came out better than batch number 1. I think we got a better roast on that grain. Now my Gramps, personally, he would like chop up a little banana when eating this. Put a little banana in his. I like mine with berries. So that's how we're gonna serve it up today. So in a bowl, get you some of that good. I'm gonna have a fairly smaller portion. I don't really want to eat this only for dinner, so that's eat as much as you want. That's the point. And then I like to add chopped berry chop, which you can chop however you like. Probably the weirdest way to cut a strawberry, but here we are. God damn it. Here's some bloobs. These are really big bloobs. Look how big those bloobs are. Biggest bloobs I ever seen. If you like big bloobs, leave a comment. And then you drink it with the milk product of your choosing. In my house, we've been drinking that oat milk because it's delicious. It's really good. But regular milk would be fine. You can give it one of those. And there you have Grandpa granola. Boom. This whole time we've been calling it Grandpa granola, but it's also Norm's Nola. Let's give it a taste. That's the stuff. Been eating that my whole life. You know, it's oaty, grainy, you know, like a cereal, but the honey and coconut flavors are wonderful. It's a little sweet, not too sweet. The salt levels, up to you. You could literally salt this like, you know, an egg or something. But I love this, and I'm looking forward to sharing this with the, you know, the select premium viewers who will have the privilege of a piece of my family history. Hope you guys enjoy this. It's pretty fun to make. It's not that expensive if you buy, you know, reasonably priced ingredients. And, you know, granola is supposed to be health food, right? So, hope you like it. That's how you do it, according to my grandpa. Bye-bye.